The night I realized my own children had left me in the nursing home like an afterthought, I didn't cry. I calculated. While they slept soundly in the beds I'd paid for, in the houses I'd helped them buy, I sat in my narrow room mapping out every favor I'd given, every sacrifice I'd made, every blind spot in their assumptions about their helpless mother. They thought they'd tucked away their problem, me, into a corner where I'd quietly fade away. They were wrong. Hello, I'm Evelyn Parker, and this is the story of how my family underestimated me, and how I turned that betrayal into the beginning of my true life. But before we dive in, I want to know, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories that hit close to home. I've been invisible for so long, I almost forgot I had a reflection. Mom, can you cover the deposit for Sarah's dance classes? Julia's voice crackled through the phone, that familiar tone that said she'd already spent the money in her head. It's just $300. Of course, sweetheart. I pressed the phone closer to my ear, watching the rain streak down my nursing home window. I'll transfer it this afternoon. You're amazing, Mom. I don't know what we'd do without you. But she'd already hung up before I could answer. She never waited for my response anymore. Hadn't for years. I was a transaction, not a conversation. I set the phone down and stared at my checkbook. In the past month alone, Eric's law firm rent when his biggest client delayed payment, $2,000. Matt's art supplies and studio space, $800. Julia's car repair, her daughter's school fees, her husband's failed business, loan, $4,000 combined. Before my husband Robert died 5 years ago, I'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat. Mornings at the bank, evenings cleaning offices. My hands were never still. Washing dishes, folding laundry, cooking, meals for whoever needed feeding. After his funeral, I became the family's financial lifeline, the invisible hand that reached into my savings whenever anyone needed rescuing. How are you holding up, Evelyn? Ruth's voice broke my thoughts. She stood in my doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee from the dining hall. I'm fine. I took the coffee gratefully. Ruth was the only person here who remembered I existed before I became someone's mother, someone's problem. Your daughter called again? Julia. Dance classes for Sarah. Ruth settled into the chair across from me, her eyes sharp with understanding. When's the last time one of them called just to talk? I couldn't remember. Every conversation started with, "How are you?" and ended with, "Could you help us with?" Somewhere in the middle. Last week Eric called, I said slowly. Needed help with a client's retainer. Said he'd pay me back when the case settled. And will he? I looked at Ruth, this woman who'd worked beside me at the bank for 20 years, who'd held my hand at Robert's funeral, who still came to visit me twice a week. He always says he will. The truth was heavier than that. Eric had been borrowing from me for 3 years, Julia for 5. Matt had never stopped borrowing since he graduated college. They saw my savings as their inheritance, available for early withdrawal whenever life got inconvenient. Remember when you managed all those rental properties after Robert got sick? Ruth asked. You were better at reading people and managing money than half the loan officers at the bank. I did remember. While Robert lay dying, I'd kept our 3 rental properties afloat, dealing with tenant complaints, maintenance issues, rent collection. I'd managed our entire financial portfolio, made investment decisions, even helped other families in the neighborhood navigate their mortgage troubles. But to my children, I was just Mom, the woman who used to burn their pancakes and forget to sign their permission slips, They never saw me balance budgets or negotiate with contractors. They never saw me work 16-hour days to pay for Eric's law school or Julia's wedding or Matt's art degree. They're good kids, I said, because that's what mothers say. Good kids don't forget their mother's birthday, Ruth replied quietly. My birthday. 3 weeks ago. I'd waited all day for calls that never came. Finally, at 10 p.m., Julia had sent a text. Sorry, crazy day. Happy birthday, Mom. Love you. Eric had forgotten entirely. Matt had sent a generic birthday meme 2 days later. They're busy, I said. Eric's building his practice. Julia's got the kids. Matt's trying to get his art career started. And what about you, Evelyn? When do you get to be busy with your own life? I stared into my coffee. When did I become the supporting character in my own story? I've been thinking about the house, I said suddenly. The words surprised me. I hadn't planned to voice them. What about it? They want me to sign it over. Eric says it's for tax purposes, estate planning. Julia thinks I should simplify my assets, since I'm not using the house anyway. Ruth's cup clinked against her. Saucer. And what do you think? I think. I paused, listening to the sound of my own voice, saying something true. I think they're treating me like I'm already dead. The silence stretched between us, filled with years of unspoken observations. I thought about all the family gatherings, where I'd sat quietly while they made decisions about my life. All the conversations that stopped when I entered the room. All the times they'd spoken about me, in third person, while I was standing right there. You know what I realized yesterday? I said. I know more about the nursing home administrator's family than my own children know about mine. Tom asks me about my day, remembers what I tell him, follows up on things that matter to me. When's the last time Eric asked me about anything other than money? Ruth leaned forward. So what are you going to do about it? I looked out the window at the parking lot where my children's cars never appeared, except for their obligatory monthly visits. 15 minutes in, 15 minutes out, just long enough to ease their guilt and update their social media with photos of their sweet mom. I'm going to start paying attention, I said finally. Really paying attention. To what? To everything they think I'm too old or too stupid to notice. I felt something shift inside me, like a door opening that had been locked for years. I wasn't just a wallet with legs. I wasn't just a problem to be managed. I was Evelyn Parker, and I'd been underestimated for too long. Ruth, I said, do you remember what you told me when I first started at the bank? That you were smarter than you gave yourself credit for. I think it's time I started believing you. I woke up on my 68th birthday, expecting nothing. And somehow my children still managed to disappoint me. The morning stretched empty and quiet in my nursing home room. Outside, families were gathering for Saturday breakfast, children's laughter echoing down the hallways. Inside, my phone sat silent on the nightstand. I'd spent the previous 67 birthdays orchestrating celebrations for everyone else. Eric's surprise party when he made partner. I'd rented the country club, coordinated with his colleagues, ordered his favorite chocolate cake from the bakery across town. Julia's sweet 16. I'd worked overtime for 3 months to afford the dress she'd seen in a magazine. Matt's 21st. I'd thrown him a dinner party with all his art school friends, even though I couldn't afford the groceries for weeks afterward. Morning, Mrs. Parker. Maria, my favorite nurse, poked her head through the doorway. How are you feeling today? It's my birthday, I said, testing the words aloud. Oh, wonderful. 68, right? Are your kids coming to visit? I looked at my phone again. Still nothing. I'm not sure. Well, I hope they are. You deserve a celebration. After Maria left, I sat in the dining hall with my oatmeal and watched other residents greet their visitors. Mrs. Chen's granddaughter brought balloons and homemade cookies. Mr. Rodriguez's son wheeled him out to the garden for a private conversation that made them both laugh. My phone buzzed once. A text from Julia. "Hope you're having a good day. Love you." I stared at the message. No happy birthday. No acknowledgement of what day it was. Just a generic pleasantry she probably sent while running errands. "Evelyn," Ruth appeared at my table. "How's the birthday girl?" "You remembered." "Of course I remembered. I've been remembering your birthday for 23 years. She set down a small wrapped package. "This is for you." Inside was a photo in a silver frame. Ruth and me at the bank's Christmas party in 1998. Both of us younger, laughing at something long forgotten. On the back, she'd written, "To the strongest woman I know, happy 68th birthday. Love, Ruth." "Ruth." My voice caught. "Don't you dare apologize for crying. It's your birthday. And you can cry if you want to." "They forgot." "I know, honey. Not just forgot to call. They forgot it was happening. Julia texted me like it was any other day." Ruth pulled her chair closer. "Tell me about Eric's last birthday." I closed my eyes, remembering. "I sent him a $500 gift card to that expensive restaurant he likes. Had flowers delivered to his office with a card signed, 'From your proud mother.' Called him that evening to sing happy birthday. And Julia's. I babysit the kids so she and Frank could have a weekend getaway. Paid for their hotel." The memories felt sharp now, like opening boxes of broken glass. "I drove 3 hours to Matt's last birthday party, brought homemade lasagna for 20 people. And what did they do for your birthday last year?" I tried to remember. Julia had called, a brief conversation about the weather and her kids' schedules. Eric had sent a card a week late. Matt had forgotten entirely until I mentioned it the next month. "This isn't new," I said slowly. "They've been forgetting me for years. I just kept pretending it didn't matter." "Why?" "Because that's what mothers do. We put everyone else first, and we convince ourselves that's love." My phone buzzed again. This time it was Eric. "How's everything, Mom? Julia said she talked to you today." Even when he did think of me, it was second-hand information through his sister. "You know what hurts most?" I said to Ruth. "It's not that they forgot. It's that they don't see me clearly enough to know what they're forgetting." "What do you mean?" "Eric sees me as a bank account with opinions. Julia sees me as a babysitter with a checkbook. Matt sees me as—" I paused, searching for the right words, as someone who'll always be there so he doesn't have to think about whether I actually am. Ruth nodded. "And what do you see when you look at them?" "I see the children I raised. Eric so determined to prove himself that he forgot how to be grateful. Julia so scared of not having enough that she takes without thinking. Matt so lost in his own world that he doesn't notice anyone else's. They're not children anymore, Evelyn. I know, but I keep treating them like they are. Keep making excuses for them. Keep fixing their problems. Keep pretending their neglect doesn't hurt." The dining hall began to empty as afternoon visiting hours started. Families streamed through the lobby, flowers and balloons and gift bags in hand. I watched them through the window, feeling like I was observing a world I'd been locked out of. "I need to ask you something," I said to Ruth. "And I need you to tell me the truth. Always. Am I foolish for wanting more from them?" Ruth was quiet for a long moment. Evelyn, you spent 40 years putting everyone else's needs before your own. You worked yourself to exhaustion keeping your family afloat. You sacrificed your dreams, your comfort, your health, to make sure they had everything they needed, and now they treat you like an obligation. So yes, I'm being foolish. No, you're being human. You're allowed to want your children to love you the way you love them. You're allowed to want them to see you, to remember you, to think about your happiness. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Matt. "Happy birthday, Mom! Sorry I'm late. Hope you had a great day." He was 4 hours late, but he'd remembered. It was something. "What happens now?" I asked Ruth. "Now you decide what you're going to do with this information." "What do you mean?" "You know who they really are now. Not who you hoped they'd become, not who you remember them being as children. You know who they are today, as adults, in their relationship with you." I looked at the photo Ruth had given me, at 2 women who'd had dreams beyond their children's needs. "I used to have ambitions," I said. "Before Robert got sick, before the kids needed so much. I wanted to go back to school, maybe start my own business. I was good with people, good with money." "You still are. But now I'm 68 and living in a nursing home because my children think I'm too fragile to manage my own life. Are you?" The question hung between us. Was I? Or had I just been so focused on everyone else's strength that I'd forgotten my own? "No," I said finally. "I'm not. Mom, we need to talk about your future." Eric's voice carried that lawyer tone he used when he'd already decided the outcome of the conversation. He sat across from me in the nursing home's family meeting room, a manila folder thick with papers spread before him. Julia flanked his right side, nodding along like a courtroom stenographer. Matt slouched in the corner, avoiding eye contact. "What about my future?" I asked. "We've been thinking about your assets," Julia said, her voice saccharine with false concern. "The house, the rental properties, your investments. It's a lot for you to manage." "I've been managing them fine, for 5 years. Mom." Eric leaned forward. "You're almost 70. You're living in assisted care. Don't you think it's time to simplify things?" I studied my eldest son's face, looking for traces of the boy who used to climb into my lap when thunderstorms scared him. "What exactly are you proposing?" Eric opened the folder and slid a stack of documents toward me. "We've talked to a financial advisor. The smartest thing would be to transfer your real estate holdings into a family trust, for tax purposes. This way, when you—" He paused delicately. "When you pass away, everything will be handled efficiently." "You mean when I die?" "Mom, don't be morbid," Julia said quickly. "We're just trying to protect your legacy." I picked up the first document, transfer of property deed. My eyes scanned the legal language, but the meaning was clear. They wanted me to sign over my house, the house Robert and I had bought 32 years ago. The house I'd worked, too. Jobs to keep when he got sick. This says I'm transferring ownership to Parker Family Holdings, LLC. I looked up at Eric. "What's Parker Family Holdings?" "A limited liability company I set up to manage the family assets. It protects everyone's interests." "Whose interests? Specifically?" Eric's jaw tightened. "The family's interests, Mom. All of us." "Including mine?" "Of course including yours. You'll be the primary beneficiary." I flipped through more pages. Not just the house, the rental properties too. 3 small apartment buildings that provided my monthly income. "And what happens to the rental income?" "It goes into the trust," Julia said. "We'll make sure you get your monthly allowance. Allowance. I repeated the word slowly. From my own properties. Mom, you don't understand the tax implications, Eric said, his patience wearing thin. If you die with all these assets in your name, the estate taxes will be enormous. This protects the family's inheritance. What if I don't want to sign? The room went silent. Matt looked up from his phone for the first time since we'd started. Mom. Julia's voice took on a patronizing edge. Be reasonable. You can't keep living in the past. You don't even use the house anymore. Because you convinced me to move here. Because you were lonely and isolated. You fell twice last winter. You forgot to pay your electric bill 3 months in a row. I had forgotten to pay the electric bill. Once, because I'd been in the hospital with pneumonia, and Julia had promised to handle my mail. But I didn't argue. I was learning to listen. Look, Eric said. We're not trying to control you. We're trying to help you. This is what responsible adult children do. Is it? I asked. What did you do with your trust fund from your grandmother? Eric's face flushed. That's different. How? I was 35 when Grandma died. I could handle complex financial decisions. And I'm 68 and apparently incapable of handling mine. Mom, you're being difficult, Julia said. We're offering to take care of everything for you. No more property management, no more tenant problems, no more worrying about maintenance and repairs. No more control over my own life. No more stress, she corrected. I looked at Matt, who was studying his fingernails like they held the secrets of the universe. What do you think, Matt? He glanced up, startled. I don't know. I mean, if Eric thinks it's best. I'm not asking what Eric thinks. I'm asking what you think. Matt looked between his siblings, then back at me. I think maybe you should have time to think about it. Eric shot him a sharp look. We've already spent 3 hours explaining this to her. 3 hours of you explaining why I should give up everything I've worked for, I said. Give up? Julia's voice rose. Mom, we're not taking anything from you. We're protecting you. By making me financially dependent on you. You're already financially dependent on us. Eric snapped, then caught himself. I mean, we're already helping you with expenses. Helping me? Or making sure I need your help? The truth was there in the room between us. Unspoken, but understood. Every time I'd helped them financially, every time I'd solved their problems with my money, I'd been creating their expectation that my resources belonged to them. Mom, Julia said more gently, you have to trust us. We're your children. We love you. Do you? The question surprised even me. It hung in the air like a challenge. Of course we love you, Eric said, but his voice was automatic, rehearsed. When's the last time any of you called me just to talk? When's the last time you visited without needing something? When's the last time you remembered my birthday without prompting? Silence. We're busy, Mom, Julia said finally. We have our own families, our own problems. And I don't? What problems could you possibly have? Eric asked. You live in a nice facility. All your needs are met. You don't have any responsibilities. I stared at him. My problem is that my children see me as a responsibility instead of a person. That's not fair, Julia said, isn't it? You want me to sign over everything I own because you think I'm too old and fragile to manage my own affairs. But you're perfectly comfortable taking my money whenever you need it. We pay you back, Eric said. Do you? Show me the records of what you've paid back. Eric's silence was answer enough. I picked up the pen they'd brought, held it over the signature line. They all leaned forward expectantly. "I need time to think," I said, setting the pen down. "Mom, we've been through this," Eric said. "The tax year ends in 6 weeks. If we don't file these papers, then we'll deal with it next year." Next year might be too late. I looked at my eldest son, this man who'd once trusted me with his deepest fears and biggest dreams. Too late for what, Eric? Too late for me to have a say in my own future. Too late to protect what you've built. What I've built belongs to me, until I decide otherwise. Julia started to protest, but I held up my hand. "I'm not signing anything today. I'm going to think about it. I'm going to talk to people I trust. And then I'll make my decision." "What people?" Eric demanded. "Mom, don't let some nursing home gossip convince you. People who care about me as a person, not just as an asset to be managed." I stood up, gathering the papers they'd brought. "I'll keep these, for my review." As I walked toward the door, I heard Julia whisper to Eric, "Maybe we should talk to the nursing home director about her mental state." I paused, my hand on the doorknob, but I didn't turn around. I was learning to listen, and I was learning to remember everything I heard. "They want me to sign away my life," I said, spreading the legal documents across Ruth's kitchen table. Ruth had picked me up for our weekly coffee date, a tradition we'd maintained since I moved to the nursing home. Her apartment was small but warm, filled with photos of grandchildren and the smell of homemade cookies. "Let me see." Ruth put on her reading glasses and examined the papers. After 20 years of processing loan applications at the bank, she could read legal documents better than most lawyers. Transfer of property deed, establishment of family trust, power of attorney. She looked up at me. "Evelyn, do you understand what this means? It means they want control of everything I own. It means they want to make you financially powerless." Ruth's voice was sharp with anger. "This isn't estate planning, honey. This is elder abuse." The words hit me like cold water. "It's not abuse. They're not hitting me, or... Financial abuse is still abuse. They're using manipulation and pressure to take control of your assets." Ruth flipped through more pages. "Look at this power of attorney clause. It gives Eric the right to make financial decisions for you without your consent. He says it's for my protection." "Protection from what? You've been managing money longer than he's been alive." Ruth set the papers down. "Evelyn, tell me honestly, have you been having trouble managing your finances?" I thought about it carefully. "No, I pay my bills on time. I track my expenses. I monitor my investments. The rental properties are profitable. The tenants are happy. I'm more financially stable than I've ever been." "So why do they think you need their help?" "Because I'm old. Because I live in a nursing home. Because they think I'm fragile." Ruth poured herself another cup of coffee, her movements sharp with frustration. "You know what I think? I think they see an opportunity. Your house alone is worth what? 400,000. Closer to 5. With the renovations Robert and I did. And the rental properties. Together, probably another 600,000. Ruth whistled low. Over $1 million in real estate alone. No wonder they're pushing so hard." "They're my children, Ruth. They wouldn't..." "Wouldn't what? Wouldn't put their own financial interests ahead of yours?" Ruth's expression was gentle but firm. "Honey, you've been supporting them financially for years. Have they ever said no when you offered to help? Have they ever suggested you keep your money for yourself? I thought about Eric's law firm struggles, Julia's constant requests for the children's expenses, Matt's endless artistic pursuits funded by my savings. No. And now that you're older, instead of supporting you, they want to control your resources. Maybe they genuinely think it's best for me. Maybe. Or maybe they've gotten used to having access to your money, and they want to formalize the arrangement. Ruth stood up and walked to her bookshelf, pulling out a photo album. Remember this? She showed me a picture from 1995. Me, at my desk at the bank, a stack of loan applications in front of me. I was wearing my favorite blue suit, the one I'd saved up to buy when I got promoted to senior loan officer. You approved more loans than any other officer in the bank's history, Ruth said. You had a sixth sense about people's financial situations. You could spot inconsistencies, identify risks, predict who would succeed and who would struggle. That was a long time ago. Those skills don't disappear at 68. If anything, you have more experience now, more wisdom. Ruth sat back down. So use those skills on your own family. What do you see? I looked at the legal documents again, but this time I tried to read them the way I used to read loan applications. Looking for inconsistencies, red flags, hidden motivations. Eric's law firm has been struggling, I said slowly. He's borrowed from me 4 times in the past year. Always promises to pay back when the big cases settle. But the payments never come. What else? Julia's husband, Frank, lost his job 8 months ago. She's been asking for help with their mortgage payments. But she tells me it's for the kids' activities. And Matt. Matt's never been financially independent. Even when he has gallery shows, he barely breaks even. But he keeps talking about expanding his studio, buying better equipment. Ruth nodded. And if they control your assets through this trust, what happens to their financial problems? The picture became clearer. They become my problems to solve, permanently, because they'll be managing your money, ostensibly for your benefit, but really for their convenience. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. They're not protecting me. They're protecting their access to my money. That's what I'm afraid of. We sat in silence while I processed this realization. My children, the babies I'd nursed, the toddlers I'd taught to walk, the teenagers I'd guided through heartbreak and triumph, were treating me like a resource to be managed, rather than a person to be respected. What do I do? I asked. First, you don't sign anything. Not until you've had time to really think about what you want. And then, Ruth smiled, and I saw a glint of the same determination that had made her the best assistant manager the bank ever had. Then you remind them who raised them. You remind them that you're not their victim. You're their mother, and mothers don't go down without a fight. I'm not a fighter, Ruth. I'm a peacekeeper. Honey, you fought for them their entire lives. You fought to keep the family together after Robert died. You fought to make sure they had everything they needed, often at the expense of what you needed. Ruth reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Now it's time to fight for yourself. How? The same way you always did, with intelligence, determination, and a refusal to accept defeat. Ruth's eyes were bright with possibility. You know what they don't know? They don't know that you're still the same woman who managed a household, raised 3 children, worked 2 jobs, and kept a family afloat through the worst crisis of their lives. They see me as helpless. Then use that. Let them think you're helpless while you figure out what's really going on. What do you mean? Ruth leaned forward. You were the best loan officer the bank ever had because you knew how to investigate people's financial situations. You knew how to find the truth behind the paperwork. Maybe it's time to investigate your own family. For the first time in months, I felt a spark of the old energy, the competence and confidence that had gotten me through decades of challenges. I wouldn't even know where to start. Start with what you do know. Start with your own records, then work backward from there. And if I find something I don't like? Ruth's smile was sharp with determination. Then you'll know what you're really dealing with, and you can decide what to do about it. I looked at the legal documents one more time, then gathered them into a neat stack. They're not going to like this. Probably not. But sometimes the people who love you most need to be reminded that you're not their possession. You're their mother, and you deserve their respect. What if they don't give it to me? Then you'll know where you really stand, and you can make your decisions accordingly. For the first time since this conversation with my children had started, I felt like I had choices, real choices, not just the illusion of choice they'd been offering me. "Ruth," I said, "will you help me?" "Honey, I've been waiting for you to ask." 2 weeks later, I sat in the nursing home's small library at 11 p.m., the only resident still awake. The night staff knew I was an insomniac, so they left me alone with my computer time. What they didn't know was that I was conducting an investigation. "Mrs. Parker?" David McKinley appeared in the doorway, Ruth's nephew, and my secret weapon. At 26, he was in his final year of law school and had agreed to help me with some family financial questions. He had no idea he was about to uncover a conspiracy. "David, thank you for coming so late." "No problem. Aunt Ruth said it was important." He set down his laptop and a stack of legal textbooks. "She mentioned you had questions about property transfers and estate planning. Something like that?" I handed him the documents Eric had brought. "I need to understand what these papers really mean." David put on his glasses and began reading. His expression grew more serious with each page. "Mrs. Parker, who prepared these documents?" "My son Eric. He's a lawyer." "And he wants you to sign them. He says it's for my protection, tax purposes." David was quiet for several minutes, cross-referencing clauses with his textbooks. Finally, he looked up. "Mrs. Parker, I have to ask, do you trust your son?" The question caught me off guard. "He's my son." That's not what I asked. I thought about Eric's impatience during our last conversation, the way he'd dismissed my concerns, the lawyer voice he used when he didn't want to explain something. I'm beginning to wonder. Because if you sign these documents, you'll essentially be giving up all control over your assets. The power of attorney clause alone gives Eric the right to make financial decisions without consulting you. He said it was standard estate planning. It's not. Standard estate planning protects your interests while you're alive. This transfers control while you're alive. David pointed to a specific clause. "See this? This gives the trustee, your son, the right to sell your properties without your consent if he deems it in the best interest of the trust." My heart started racing. Meaning if Eric decides your house needs to be sold, he can sell it. If he thinks the rental properties are too much trouble, he can liquidate them. You'd have no legal recourse. But I'd still get the money, right? David's expression was grim. You'd get whatever the trustee decides to give you, as a monthly distribution from your own assets. The full impact hit me like a physical blow. They're not trying to protect me. They're trying to take everything I own. It's certainly possible. David closed his laptop. Mrs. Parker, would you be willing to let me do some research? I'd like to look into your family's financial situation. See if there's anything that might explain why they're pushing so hard for this arrangement. What kind of research? Public records, property transfers, business filings, court documents, all legal, all public information. I hesitated. This felt like crossing a line, investigating my own children like they were criminals. But the alternative was signing away my independence based on blind trust that was feeling less deserved every day. Yes, I said. I want to know what's really going on. It might take a few days, maybe a week. I have time. 3 days later, David returned with a thick folder and a grim expression. Mrs. Parker, we need to talk. He spread documents across the library table like evidence in a trial. Bank statements, property records, business registrations, court filings. I started with your son, Eric's law firm, David said. Parker and Associates, LLC, registered 18 months ago. He said he was expanding his practice. He was, but not in the way you might expect. David pulled out a series of financial documents. The firm has been operating in the red since it opened. More than $200,000 in debt. I stared at the numbers. But he's been successful. He told me about his big cases, his important clients. I found records of only 3 cases in the past year. None of them settled for more than $20,000. David's voice was gentle but firm. Mrs. Parker, I don't think your son has the successful law practice he's been telling you about. The betrayal cut deep. All those times Eric had borrowed money for office expenses and client development. He'd been lying to me. What about Julia? David pulled out another stack of papers. Your daughter's husband, Frank, lost his job 8 months ago. Like you suspected. But he didn't lose it due to layoffs. He was terminated for embezzlement from his employer's petty cash fund. Embezzlement? Small amounts over time. He wasn't prosecuted, but he was fired and blacklisted from his industry. David showed me employment records. He hasn't worked since. Julia's been supporting the family on her part-time income from her bookkeeping clients, which amounts to about $800 a month. So, when she asked me for money for the children's activities, she's actually asking for money to pay their mortgage and basic living expenses. David pulled out credit card statements. They're 3 months behind on their house payments and carrying over $40,000 in credit card debt. I felt sick. And Matt? Your youngest son is the most interesting case. David's expression was almost admiring. He's not struggling financially. In fact, he's doing quite well. What do you mean? Matt's been selling his artwork through online galleries for the past 2 years. His average monthly income is around $4,000. He has a healthy savings account and no significant debt. I stared at David. But he's always asking me for money for art supplies, studio rent. Money he doesn't need. Money he's been saving. David pulled out bank statements. Mrs. Parker, your youngest son, has been systematically saving every dollar you've given him. He has over $50,000 in a high-yield savings account. The revelation left me speechless. Matt, my baby, my struggling artist, had been lying to me for years. Why? I whispered. I don't know. But I have a theory. David leaned forward. I think your children have been planning this for a while. Eric needs money, desperately. Julia needs money desperately. Matt doesn't need money, but he's been accumulating it anyway. You think they've been coordinating this? I think they've been talking to each other about your assets for longer than you realize. And I think they've been positioning themselves to take control when the opportunity arose. I looked at all the evidence spread across the table. The proof that my children had been systematically deceiving me while planning to take control of everything I owned. There's more, David said quietly. More. He pulled out a property record. 2 months ago, Eric filed papers to establish Parker Family Holdings, LLC, the same company mentioned in the trust documents. So? Look at the address. I looked. It was Eric's office address. I don't understand. Mrs. Parker, your son established this company 2 months before he asked you to sign the trust documents. He's been planning this conversation for at least that long. The premeditation was somehow worse than the deception. This wasn't a spontaneous decision to help me manage my affairs. This was a calculated plan to take control of my assets. What else? David hesitated. I found something else. Something that might be hard to hear. Tell me. I found email correspondence between Eric, Julia, and Julia's husband, Frank. David pulled out printed emails. They've been discussing your situation for months. What situation? David handed me the first email. It was from Julia to Eric, dated 3 months ago. Eric, we need to talk about Mom. Frank thinks we're waiting too long. She's getting older and her judgment isn't what it used to be. If we don't act soon, she might make decisions that hurt all of us. Can you set up the trust paperwork? I read Eric's response. Already working on it. I've been tracking her spending. She's too generous with random charities and that nursing home friend of hers. We need to establish oversight before she gives away our inheritance. And Frank's reply, good. Julia and I are struggling here. We need this resolved quickly. Matt's on board. He understands the family needs to stick together. I set the emails down with shaking hands. They've been planning this for months. At least 3 months, based on what I found. And Matt knew? Matt knew. He's been part of the conversations, even if he's not as desperate for money as the others. I stared at the evidence of my children's betrayal. Not just financial deception, but months of planning to take control of my life under the guise of helping me. Mrs. Parker, David said gently, I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you wanted to find. Actually, it's exactly what I needed to find. My voice was steadier than I felt. Now I know what I'm dealing with. What are you going to do? I looked at all the documents, the evidence of their lies, their debts, their conspiracy. My children had underestimated me in every way that mattered. They'd assumed I was too old, too trusting, too dependent to discover the truth. They were wrong. I'm going to show them that their mother is a lot smarter than they think, I said, and I'm going to make sure they understand that respect isn't optional in this family. How? I gathered the documents into neat stacks, my mind already forming a plan. The same way I solved every other family crisis over the past 40 years, with patience, strategy, and a refusal to be anyone's victim. David smiled for the first time that evening. Your Aunt Ruth was right about you. What did she say? She said you were the strongest woman she'd ever met. She also said your children had no idea what they were up against. I looked at the evidence of their betrayal one more time, then locked it away in the folder. They're about to find out. Caroline, I need your help. Caroline Hayes had been Robert's lawyer before he died, and she'd handled our wills and estate planning for 15 years. At 72, she was sharp as ever, and had a reputation for protecting her clients' interests above all else. Evelyn! What a nice surprise. Caroline gestured for me to sit in her comfortable office chair. Ruth called and said you had some questions about family trusts. More than questions. I have a situation. I opened David's folder and spread the evidence across her desk. My children want me to sign documents that would give them control of all my assets. I need to know if what they're doing is legal. Caroline put on her reading glasses and began examining the papers. Her expression grew darker with each document she reviewed. Evelyn, where did you get these financial records? Ruth's nephew David helped me research my children's actual financial situations. I needed to understand why they were pressuring me so hard. Caroline continued reading, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. After 20 minutes, she looked up at me with a mixture of anger and concern. Evelyn, what your children are proposing isn't just inadvisable. It's potentially fraudulent. What do you mean? They're asking you to transfer assets to a trust while concealing material information about their financial situations and motivations. If they were strangers, this would be considered elder fraud. But they're not strangers. They're my children, which makes it worse, not better. Caroline leaned forward. The law recognizes that family members can exploit elderly relatives just as easily as strangers can, sometimes more easily, because of the trust relationship. So what can I do? First, you don't sign anything. Second, we take steps to protect your assets immediately. Caroline pulled out a fresh legal pad. With your permission, I'd like to place temporary holds on any major financial transactions involving your properties, just until we can sort this out. Can you do that? I can request it based on evidence of potential fraud. It won't prevent them from asking, but it will prevent them from acting without your explicit consent. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. Yes, do it. Caroline made several notes. Now, I have to ask, what do you want to achieve here? Do you want to cut them off entirely, or do you want to establish boundaries? I want them to understand that I'm not their victim, and I want them to be honest with me about their situations. All three of them? I thought about Matt, who'd been the most passive during our family meeting, but who'd been deceiving me the longest. I want to start with Matt. He's the one who seemed most uncomfortable with the whole thing. Good instinct. Often the weakest link in a conspiracy is the person with the least to lose. That afternoon, I called Matt and asked him to visit, me alone. He arrived looking nervous, fidgeting with his keys. Hey, Mom, is everything okay? Eric said you were being difficult about the trust papers. Sit down, Matt. Something in my tone made him freeze. Mom, what's wrong? I want to show you something. I pulled out his bank statements, the ones David had obtained from public records. I want you to tell me what this is. Matt's face went white as he recognized his own financial documents. Mom, I can explain. $53,000, Matt. That's how much you have in your savings account. Money I gave you for art supplies and studio rent and living expenses. Mom, money you told me you desperately needed while you were actually doing quite well, selling your artwork. Matt slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. How did you find out? Does it matter how? What matters is that you've been lying to me for years. I wasn't trying to hurt you. What were you trying to do? Matt was quiet for a long moment. I was scared. Of what? Of never having enough. Of failing like Dad always said I would. Of not being able to take care of myself when you... He paused. When you weren't around anymore. His honesty caught me off guard. So you've been hoarding money I gave you? I've been saving it. For the future, for when I really needed it. And the trust? Were you planning to help Eric and Julia take control of my assets? Matt's shoulders sagged. Eric said it was the best thing for you, that you were getting older and might make bad financial decisions. He said it would protect you. Did you believe him? I wanted to believe him. It was easier than thinking about what would happen if you got sick or if you needed expensive care or if... Matt looked up at me with tears in his eyes. Mom, I was scared of losing you, and I was scared of being responsible for taking care of you. The raw honesty in his voice disarmed my anger. This wasn't Eric's calculated manipulation or Julia's desperate greed. This was a frightened young man who'd been trying to protect himself from future uncertainty. Matt, what do you think would happen if I needed expensive care? We'd have to sell everything. The house, the rental properties. We'd have to spend all your money on nursing home costs and medical bills. And then what? And then there'd be nothing left for us. I studied my youngest son's face, seeing the boy who'd been afraid of thunderstorms and the man who was afraid of financial storms. Is that what this is really about? You're not trying to help me. You're trying to preserve your inheritance? Matt flinched like I'd slapped him. When you put it like that, it sounds horrible. How would you put it? I don't know. Matt buried his face in his hands. Mom, I'm sorry. I know I've been lying to you. I know taking your money when I didn't need it was wrong. But I was so scared of what would happen if you ran out of money. So you decided to make sure I couldn't spend my own money freely. Eric said the trust would make sure there was enough for your care and enough left over for us. And what did you think about what I wanted? Matt looked up at me. I guess I didn't think about it. You didn't think I should have a say in how my own money gets spent? I thought you'd want to take care of us, even after you were gone. I felt a deep sadness settle over me. Matt, I've been taking care of you your entire life. I've supported your art career, paid for your supplies, covered your rent, bought your groceries. I've never said no when you asked for help. I know. And in return, you've been lying to me and planning to take control of my finances because you're afraid I might spend my own money on myself instead of saving it for you. Matt started crying. Not the manipulative tears I might have expected, but genuine remorse. Mom, I know how it sounds. I know it's selfish, but I've never been good with money, and I've never been able to take care of myself. And the thought of you not being there to help me anymore. Matt, you have $53,000 in savings and a successful art career. You're more financially stable than most people your age. But what if it doesn't last? What if people stop buying my art? What if I get sick or hurt and can't work? I looked at my youngest child and saw the core of the problem. I'd been so focused on taking care of him that I'd never taught him to take care of himself. I'd been so determined to protect him from financial hardship that I'd made him afraid of financial independence. Matt, I want you to listen to me very carefully. He wiped his eyes and nodded. I love you. I will always love you. And I will always help you if you're truly in need. Okay. But I will not let you control my life because you're afraid of living your own. What do you mean? I mean you're 32 years old. You have a career, savings, and skills. You don't need me to take care of you anymore, and I don't need you to take care of me. But Mom, no, listen to me. I am 68 years old, not 88. I am living in assisted care by choice. not by necessity. I am financially stable, mentally sharp, and perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Matt nodded slowly. If you want to be part of my life going forward, it has to be as an adult who respects my autonomy, not as a child who thinks he knows what's best for me. What about Eric and Julia? What about them? Are you going to forgive them too? I thought about Eric's calculated manipulation and Julia's desperate greed. That depends on whether they're willing to be honest with me the way you just were. And if they're not, then they'll learn that their mother is not as helpless as they assumed. Matt was quiet for several minutes. Mom, what do you want me to do? I want you to stop lying to me. I want you to stop taking money you don't need. And I want you to start building a relationship with me based on honesty instead of financial dependence. And the trust? Eric's going to be really angry if I don't support the plan. Eric can be as angry as he wants. But you're going to tell him that you've changed your mind, that you think I should have control over my own assets. He's not going to like that. Matt, whose approval matters more to you, your brother's or your mother's? He met my eyes for the first time since our conversation began. Yours, Mom. It's always been yours. Then prove it. The phone rang at 6 a.m. Eric's voice was sharp with barely controlled anger. Matt told me you've been snooping into our private financial information. Good morning to you too, Eric. Don't play games with me, Mom. What you did was a violation of our privacy. You had no right to investigate us like we're criminals. I sat up in bed, fully awake now. I had every right to understand why my children were pressuring me to sign over my assets. We're trying to help you by lying to me about your financial situations, by hiding the fact that you're drowning in debt while asking me to trust you with my life savings. Silence on the other end of the line. Eric, are you there? How much do you know? His tone had shifted from anger to something that sounded like fear. I know about your law firm's debts. I know about Julia's mortgage problems and Frank's employment situation. I know you've been planning this for months. Mom, you don't understand the full picture. Then explain it to me. Not over the phone. I'm coming over. Julia and I need to talk to you. No, Eric. If you want to talk to me, we do it in a neutral location with a witness present. A witness? Mom, what's gotten into you? I've gotten smart, Eric. Something you and your sister apparently didn't expect. 2 hours later, we met in the nursing home's conference room. I'd asked Caroline Hayes to attend as my legal advisor, and I'd invited Ruth for moral support. Eric's arrived with Julia and, surprisingly, Frank. They looked like defendants entering a courtroom. This is ridiculous, Julia said as they took seats across from me. We are family. We don't need lawyers present for family discussions. We do when family members are trying to defraud me, I replied calmly. Eric's jaw tightened. No one's trying to defraud you. Really? I opened the folder containing David's research. Then explain this. I laid out the documents methodically. Eric's business debt, Julia's mortgage arrears, Frank's termination for embezzlement, the emails planning my situation. You've been lying to me for months while plotting to take control of my assets. I continued. If that's not fraud, what would you call it? It's family looking out for family, Julia said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? When Eric borrows money from me for his successful law practice that's actually failing, is that family looking out for family? Eric's face flushed, red. My practice isn't failing. It's going through a temporary rough patch. A $200,000 rough patch that you hid from me while asking me to trust you with my life savings. Mom, every business has challenges. Every business doesn't embezzle from their elderly mother to stay afloat. I didn't embezzle anything. Eric's voice rose. I borrowed money with every intention of paying it back. When? You've been borrowing from me for 3 years. Show me one payment you've made toward what you owe me. Eric fell silent. I turned to Julia. And you, when you ask me for money for Sarah's dance classes or Tommy's baseball equipment, are those actually for the children? Julia looked at her hands. The money goes to help the children. By paying your mortgage so you don't lose the house, that helps the children too. It does, but lying to me about it doesn't help anyone. I pulled out Frank's employment records. And speaking of lies, when were you planning to tell me that Frank was fired for stealing from his employer? Frank spoke for the first time since arriving. It wasn't stealing. It was borrowing. I was planning to pay it back. Sound familiar? Ruth said dryly. This is exactly the problem, I continued. Every one of you has been borrowing and planning to pay back while never actually paying back anything. And now you want legal control over my finances so you can formalize this arrangement. Mom, we're not the enemy here, Julia said, tears starting to form. We're struggling, yes, but we're still your children. We still love you. Do you? Or do you love what I can do for you financially? That's not fair, Eric said. Isn't it? When's the last time any of you called me just to see how I was doing? When's the last time you visited without needing something? When's the last time you remembered my birthday without prompting? The silence in the room was deafening. You want to know what's not fair? I continued. What's not fair is spending 40 years raising children who see me as an ATM with emotions. What's not fair is being manipulated and lied to by the people I trusted most. What's not fair is being treated like I'm mentally incompetent when I'm actually more financially stable than any of you. We never said you were mentally incompetent, Julia protested. Caroline Hayes spoke up for the first time. Actually, you did. In your email correspondence, you questioned her judgment and discussed the need to establish oversight over her decisions. Eric shot a sharp look at Caroline. Those emails were private. They were evidence of conspiracy to commit elder fraud. Caroline replied evenly. Now wait just a minute. Eric started to stand. Sit down, Eric. My voice cut through his bluster. You're going to listen to what I have to say. Something in my tone made him sink back into his chair. I am 68 years old. I am not senile, incompetent, or incapable of managing my own affairs. I have more money in savings than all 3 of you combined. I own properties that generate steady income, and I have been making sound financial decisions longer than you've been alive. I stood up, feeling more powerful than I had in years. I will not be signing any trust documents. I will not be transferring control of my assets to anyone. And I will not be providing financial support to any of you until you can prove that you're being honest with me about your actual needs and your actual situations. Mom, you can't just cut us off, Julia said, panic creeping into her voice. I'm not cutting you off. I'm establishing boundaries. If you need help, ask for it honestly. If you need money, explain what it's really for. If you're struggling, tell me the truth instead of lying and manipulating. And if we don't? Eric asked. Then you'll have to figure out your problems without using me as your personal bank." Frank cleared his throat. "Mrs. Parker, you have to understand. We have children to think about. Julia and I can't just—" "Frank," I interrupted, "you stole money from your employer. You lost your job because of your own choices. Your financial problems are the result of your own actions, not something I'm responsible for solving." "But the grandchildren—" "The grandchildren have parents. Parents who need to take responsibility for their own lives, instead of expecting their grandmother to fund their poor decisions." I looked around the table at their shocked faces. They'd expected me to be hurt, confused, maybe a little angry. They hadn't expected me to be strategic. "Here's what's going to happen," I continued. "Eric, you're going to provide me with a complete accounting of every dollar you've borrowed from me over the past 3 years. You're going to create a repayment plan, and you're going to be honest with me about the state of your law practice." "Mom, I'm not finished. Julia, you and Frank are going to sit down with a financial counselor and create a realistic budget. You're going to apply for jobs that match your skills, and you're going to stop asking me for money until you can prove you're making an effort to solve your own problems." "This is unreasonable," Julia said. "What's unreasonable is 3 adults expecting their elderly mother to fund their lifestyles while lying to her about their situations." I gathered my papers and stood to leave. "Where are you going?" Eric demanded. "I'm going to live my life, something I should have been doing all along instead of enabling yours." As I reached the door, Julia called out, "Mom, what if we can't manage without your help?" I turned back to look at my children. These adults who'd forgotten they were capable of taking care of themselves. "Then you'll learn. The same way I did when your father died, and I had to figure out how to support a family on my own." "But that's different," Eric said. "You had to do that. We have other options." "No, Eric. You had other options. Past tense. From now on, your option is the same one everyone else has. Take responsibility for your own life." I walked out of the conference room, leaving my children to contemplate their new reality. For the first time in years, I felt like I was in control of my own story. The confrontation I'd been dreading came 3 days later. Eric and Julia requested another meeting, this time without Frank or outside advisors. They wanted to work things out as a family. I agreed to meet them in the nursing home's garden, a neutral space where other residents and staff could see us. I'd learned not to trust my children's motives, but I still hoped we could find a path toward honesty. "Mom, we've been thinking about what you said," Julia began, her voice carefully modulated. "Maybe we could compromise." "What kind of compromise?" Eric leaned forward. "We withdraw the trust proposal. You maintain control of your assets, but we establish a family financial plan that ensures everyone's needs are met." "Meaning?" "Meaning we formalize the financial support you've been providing," Julia said. "Set up regular monthly payments to help each of us through our current difficulties. In exchange, we guarantee your care and comfort as you age." I studied their faces, looking for signs of genuine remorse or change. What I saw was calculation. "So, instead of taking legal control of my money, you want me to voluntarily commit to supporting you financially for the foreseeable future?" "It's not support," Eric said. "It's family looking out for each other." "And what happens if I become unable to manage my own affairs? Who takes over then?" "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it," Julia said. "No, we'll discuss it now." I pulled out a legal document Caroline had prepared. "This is a durable power of attorney that designates Caroline Hayes as my financial advocate if I become incapacitated. Not you, Not Julia, not Matt. A neutral party who's legally bound to act in my interests alone. Eric's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the anger underneath. You're seriously going to give control to a stranger instead of your own children? I'm going to give control to someone I trust to put my interests first. We're your children. Julia's voice cracked with emotion. We love you. Do you? Because I've been thinking about that a lot lately. I set down the papers and looked at them directly. I've been thinking about what love actually means in this family. What's that supposed to mean? Eric demanded. It means I've spent 40 years believing that love meant sacrificing my own needs for yours. That love meant never saying no when you needed help. That love meant putting your financial security ahead of my own peace of mind. That's what mothers do, Julia said. Some mothers do that. I did that. But what do children do who love their mothers? They were silent. Children who love their mothers don't lie to them. They don't manipulate them. They don't plot behind their backs to take control of their lives. My voice was steady, but my heart was breaking. Children who love their mothers care about their mother's happiness, not just their inheritance. We do care about your happiness, Eric said, but his voice lacked conviction. Really? When's the last time either of you asked me what would make me happy? Silence again. I'll tell you what would make me happy. Having children who see me as a person, not a resource. Having children who visit because they enjoy my company, not because they need my money. Having children who are honest with me about their lives instead of treating me like I'm too fragile or too stupid to handle the truth. Mom, we never thought you were stupid, Julia said. Didn't you? Then why did you think you could lie to me for years without me figuring it out? Why did you think you could manipulate me into signing away my independence? Why did you assume I wouldn't investigate when something didn't feel right? Eric's composure finally cracked. Because you've always been naive. You've always trusted people too easily, been too generous, made financial decisions based on emotion instead of logic. Like the decision to put Eric through law school, or pay for Julia's wedding, or support Matt's art career for 10 years. That's different. How is it different? Those were emotional decisions. I made them because I loved you, not because they were smart investments. And they turned out fine because I'm not actually as naive as you think I am. I stood up, feeling the weight of years of assumptions falling away. I know exactly who you are, I continued. Eric, you're brilliant but arrogant. You think intelligence gives you the right to control other people's decisions. You've been struggling in your law practice because you're too proud to ask for help and too stubborn to admit when you're wrong. Eric's face went white, but I wasn't finished. Julia, you're scared. You've been scared since your father died. That there won't be enough. Not enough money, not enough security, not enough love to go around. So you take what you can get and justify it by telling yourself you're protecting your children. Julia started crying, but I continued. And both of you have forgotten that I raised you to be stronger than this. I raised you to be honest, to work hard, to take responsibility for your own choices. Instead, you've become adults who think lying to their mother is acceptable, as long as it serves your purposes. Mom, please. Julia reached for my hand, but I pulled away. No, I'm not done. I felt years of suppressed truth pouring out. You want to know what else I figured out? This isn't really about money. This is about control. You can't stand that I'm getting older because it means you have to be adults. You can't stand that I live in a nursing home because it reminds you that I won't be here forever to solve your problems. That's not true, Eric said, but his voice was hollow. Isn't it? Your entire financial plan depends on me funding your lives indefinitely. What happens when I die, Eric? What happens to your law practice when you can't borrow from Mom anymore? What happens to Julia's mortgage payments when I'm not here to cover them? The question hung in the air like a challenge. We'll figure it out, Julia whispered. No, you won't, because you've spent so many years depending on me that you've forgotten how to depend on yourselves. I gathered my papers, feeling a mixture of sadness and relief. That ends today. What do you mean? Eric asked. I mean, I'm not enabling your financial dependence anymore. I'm not covering your debts, funding your lifestyles, or pretending that your problems are my responsibility to solve. Mom, you can't just abandon us, Julia pleaded. I'm not abandoning you. I'm refusing to participate in your self-destruction. I looked at both of them, these children I'd loved and protected, and apparently failed to prepare for adult life. I love you too much to keep rescuing you from the consequences of your own choices. So what? You're just going to cut us off completely? Eric's anger was back, sharp and defensive. I'm going to stop being your financial safety net. If you want a relationship with me going forward, it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect, not on what I can do for you financially. And if we can't manage that? Julia asked through her tears. I felt a deep sadness settle over me. Then I guess you'll have to decide what matters more to you, my money or my presence in your life. I walked away from them then, leaving my children to confront a question they'd never had to answer before. Who were they when they couldn't depend on their mother to solve their problems? Behind me, I heard Julia crying and Eric muttering, angrily to himself. But I didn't turn around. For the first time in 40 years, I was putting my own needs first. And it felt like freedom. 6 weeks later, I sat in Caroline Hayes' office, signing the final paperwork to establish the Parker Senior Housing Initiative. What had started as an investigation into my children's deception had evolved into something larger, a purpose for the next chapter of my life. This is quite ambitious, Evelyn, Caroline said as she reviewed the documents. Converting 3 rental properties into affordable senior housing, establishing a non-profit foundation, creating a board of directors. Are you sure you're ready for this level of commitment? I've never been more sure of anything. The plan had crystallized during countless conversations with Ruth and several other nursing home residents. So many of them were there, not because they needed intensive care, but because they couldn't afford to live independently on fixed incomes. They needed affordable housing, community support, and the dignity of choice about their own lives. My rental properties could provide that. Instead of generating income for my children's lifestyle expenses, they could generate something more valuable: independence for people who'd spent their lives contributing to their communities. The first building should be ready in 3 months, I told Caroline. Ruth's already agreed to be the resident manager. And your children, how do they feel about this? I thought about the awkward conversations I'd had with Eric, Julia, and Matt over the past month. They'd each approached me separately, testing the waters, trying to understand if my new boundaries were temporary or permanent. Matt's been the most supportive. He's actually offered to donate some of his artwork for the common areas. That's encouraging. Julia's struggling. She keeps trying to find ways to ask for money without actually asking. Last week, she called to tell me about Sarah's urgent need for orthodontic work. And? I told her to check into payment plans and dental insurance. She hung up on me. Caroline smiled. And Eric? Eric Eric's been trying to convince me that I'm making a mistake. He thinks I'm being taken advantage of by people who don't have my best interests at heart. Meaning Ruth and me? Meaning anyone who isn't him. I leaned back in my chair, feeling tired but determined. Caroline, do you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing something brave. You're choosing to use your resources to create something meaningful instead of just preserving them for people who took them for granted. But am I being too hard on my children? Caroline set down her pen and looked at me directly. Evelyn, in 40 years of practicing law, I've seen a lot of family financial dynamics. What I've learned is that money doesn't change people. It reveals them. What do you mean? Your children's response to your boundaries tells you everything you need to know about their priorities. If they were primarily concerned about your well-being, they'd support your decision to do something that makes you happy. Instead, they're focused on how your choices affect their access to your resources. The truth of that observation hit me like a physical weight. So, I'm not being unreasonable. You're being realistic, and you're modeling something important for them, that people are responsible for their own lives, even when those people are their children. A knock on Caroline's office door interrupted our conversation. Her secretary peeked in. Ms. Hayes, there's a young man here who says he's Mrs. Parker's grandson. He's asking to speak with her. My heart lurched. David. Sarah. He said his name was David, about 22, very polite. I looked at Caroline, who nodded encouragingly. Send him in. David entered hesitantly, his eyes red-rimmed and his usual confident posture replaced by something smaller, more uncertain. He was Julia's eldest, the one who'd always been closest to me before. Everything. Grandma? His voice cracked slightly. I'm sorry to interrupt. I didn't know where else to find you. Sit down, sweetheart. I gestured to the chair beside me, my anger at his parents momentarily overwhelmed by concern for this young man I'd helped raise. What's wrong? It's Mom and Uncle Eric. They're saying things about you. Terrible things. He sat heavily, running his hands through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest tight. They're telling everyone you've lost your mind, that you're being manipulated by strangers, that you're throwing away the family's security out of spite. Caroline and I exchanged glances. What do you think, David? He looked at me directly for the first time since entering. I think they're scared, and I think they've been lying to me my whole life about who you really are. What do you mean? I mean, I've been thinking about all the stories they told me, about how you were always fragile after Grandpa died, how you needed them to take care of the complicated financial stuff, how you were too trusting and emotional to make good decisions. His voice grew stronger. But that never matched the grandmother I knew. The one who taught me chess and helped me with my college applications and somehow always knew exactly the right thing to say when I was struggling. I felt tears pricking my eyes. They told you I was fragile? They made it sound like you were this delicate flower who couldn't handle reality. But you handled reality just fine when you worked 2 jobs to put Uncle Eric through law school. You handled reality when you managed Grandpa's rental properties for 15 years. You handled reality when you dealt with every family crisis and somehow made everything better. Caroline handed him a tissue as his own tears started. The grandmother I know is the strongest person I have ever met. So when Mom and Uncle Eric started talking about how you were being taken advantage of and making irrational decisions, I started asking questions. What kind of questions? Like why, if you're so incompetent, did you figure out what they were doing with your money when they thought they were being so clever? Like why, if you're so fragile, are you the one who actually has a plan for your life while they're both falling apart without your financial support? My heart swelled with pride and heartbreak in equal measure. What did they say when you asked? They got angry, really angry. Mom accused me of being turned against the family, and Uncle Eric said I was too young to understand the complexities of the situation. David's voice grew bitter. Then they told me I should choose sides, them or you, that I couldn't have a relationship with you if I wanted to remain part of the real family. Caroline leaned forward. And what did you tell them? I told them that any family that makes you choose between love and truth isn't much of a family at all. He looked at me with an expression of such mature sadness that it broke my heart. Grandma, I'm 22 years old, and my mom and uncle are asking me to cut off the person who's been the most consistent source of love and wisdom in my life. Does that sound rational to you? I reached over and took his hand. No, sweetheart, it doesn't. I want you to know that whatever you're doing, this housing project, the changes you're making, I support you, and I'm not the only one. Sarah does too, even though she's scared to say anything, because she still lives at home. And Matt. Uncle Matt came to see me last week. He did? He wanted me to know that what Mom and Uncle Eric are saying isn't true, that you're not vindictive or irrational or any of the things they're claiming. He said you're finally standing up for yourself, and it's about time. Caroline was taking notes, her expression thoughtful. David, can I ask you something? Your mother and uncle, are they trying to gather support for any kind of legal action against your grandmother? His face darkened. They've been talking to lawyers. Something about elder abuse and undue influence. They think if they can prove you're being manipulated, they can overturn the power of attorney and get control of your assets back. I see. Caroline's voice was calm, but I could see the steel in her eyes. And what evidence do they think they have? The fact that you're giving your money away instead of saving it for family. The fact that you're trusting strangers, like Ruth and you. He nodded to Caroline. Instead of your own children. They think any reasonable person would see that as proof you're not thinking clearly. Caroline smiled grimly. What they don't understand is that competency isn't measured by whether someone makes the decisions other people want them to make. It's measured by whether someone can understand information, weigh options, and make decisions consistent with their own values and goals. Exactly, David said. And Grandma, your values have always been about helping people and creating something meaningful. This housing project, it's the most you thing I can imagine. I squeezed his hand, feeling a warmth I hadn't experienced in months. Thank you for saying that. I have something else to tell you. He pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. I wrote you a letter. I wanted to make sure you knew exactly how I felt, in case they'd try to make it so I can't see you anymore. I opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Inside was 3 pages of David's careful handwriting, every word a testimony to the relationship we'd built over 22 years. He wrote about the summers he'd spent with me, the life lessons I'd taught him, the way I'd listened to his teenage heartbreaks, and college anxieties without judgment. He wrote about watching me work multiple jobs and still find energy to attend his school plays and soccer games. He wrote about the quiet strength he'd always seen in me and his growing understanding that his parents had been rewriting history to serve their own purposes. But it was the last paragraph that undid me completely. Grandma, I don't know what the future holds for our family, but I know this. You taught me that love isn't about what someone can give you or do for you. It's about seeing someone for who they really are and valuing them anyway. You've always seen me for who I really am. I want you to know that I see you too. Not as the fragile victim Mom and Uncle Eric describe, but as the brilliant, strong, generous woman who helped shape who I am today. Whatever happens next, I'm proud to be your grandson. Through my tears, I looked at this young man who'd somehow managed to grow up honest and clear-sighted, despite being raised by parents who'd forgotten how to see truth clearly. David, I need you to know something. Fighting back against your parents isn't about revenge or spite. It's about refusing to disappear. I know that. And I need you to know that whatever legal challenges they bring, whatever stories they tell, whatever pressure they put on you or Sarah, none of that changes who we are to each other. He nodded, wiping his own eyes. Can I ask you something? Anything. Are you happy? I mean, really happy for the first time in a long time? I thought about it carefully. Despite the pain of my children's betrayal, despite the uncertainty of legal battles ahead, despite the grief of a family, fractured perhaps beyond repair. Yes, I said. I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm making decisions based on what I believe is right, not on what other people need from me. I'm using my resources to create something meaningful, instead of just preserving them for people who took them for granted. I'm surrounded by people who see my worth. Ruth, Caroline, the residents who'll benefit from the housing project, and you. Caroline gathered her papers, sensing our conversation was winding down. Evelyn, I'll prepare responses to any legal challenges your children might file. David, if you're comfortable with it, your testimony about your grandmother's competency and character could be very valuable. Whatever you need, he said immediately. As we prepared to leave, David turned to me one more time. Grandma, Mom and Uncle Eric keep asking what you want from them. What would make you forgive them and go back to the way things were? Do you know what you'd tell them if they asked you directly? I considered the question that had been haunting me for weeks. I'd tell them that forgiveness and trust are different things. I can forgive them for their mistakes, their fears, their poor choices. But trusting them again would require them to acknowledge what they did wrong and demonstrate real change over time. And going back to the way things were? The way things were wasn't working, David. It wasn't working for me. And ultimately, it wasn't working for them either. You can't build healthy relationships on lies and manipulation and financial dependence. If we're going to have a future together as a family, it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect. What if they can't do that? I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of this possibility. Then I'll love them from a distance and build my happiness with the people who can. As we walked out of Caroline's office together, I realized that, for the first time in decades, I wasn't trying to hold my family together through the sheer force of my will and resources. I was finally free to discover who I could become when I wasn't constantly managing other people's crises. And that person, I was beginning to understand, was someone I could be proud of. 3 months later, I stood in the lobby of Parker House, the first of my converted senior housing buildings, watching Ruth direct the placement of Matt's latest painting. The watercolor showed our town's main streets in autumn, warm and welcoming, and it was the perfect centerpiece for what we'd created here. The building buzzed with activity. 12 seniors had moved in over the past month, transforming the space from an empty rental property into a genuine community. Mrs. Chen from the nursing home was teaching Tai Chi in the common room. Mr. Rodriguez, a retired mechanic, had organized a workshop space in the basement where residents could work on small projects and repairs. Dorothy Williams, a former librarian, had set up a lending library and book club. I wasn't living here myself. I'd chosen to stay at the nursing home, at least for now. But I visited daily, and the energy of the place filled me with the same satisfaction I'd once found in nurturing my children. "Evelyn!" Ruth called from across the lobby. "The reporter from the Herald is here for the interview." The article was meant to highlight the Parker Senior Housing Initiative and its impact on the community. What it would really document was the transformation of a woman who'd been written off as irrelevant into someone creating meaningful change. As I spoke with the reporter, describing the project and our future plans, I caught sight of a familiar figure through the front window. Julia stood on the sidewalk, staring at the building with an expression I couldn't quite read. After the interview concluded, I found her still there, looking smaller and more uncertain than I'd seen her in years. "Hello, Julia," she startled, then straightened her shoulders in a gesture that reminded me painfully of the strong little girl she'd once been. "Mom, I heard about all this." She gestured toward the building. "It looks nice. Thank you. Would you like to see inside?" She hesitated, and for a moment I thought she might refuse. "Yes, I'd like that." I gave her a tour of Parker House, pointing out the accessible features, the community spaces, the small but dignified apartments. She asked practical questions about costs and services, her lawyer's wife training evident in how she evaluated what we'd created. "It really is impressive," she said as we finished in the community garden behind the building. "You've thought of everything. Ruth and the residents have contributed most of the good ideas. I just provided the foundation." We sat on a bench overlooking the garden, where several residents were tending vegetables and flowers. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything unsaid. "Mom, I need to tell you something." Julia's voice was quieter than usual. "Frank's business failed completely. We're losing the house." I waited, not offering immediate solutions, for the first time in our relationship. "Eric's practice is struggling too. The lawsuit you threatened never materialized, but word got out about the irregularities with your accounts. Some of his clients left." She was crying now, quiet tears that seemed to surprise her. We're both in real trouble, and for the first time in our adult lives, we can't come to you to fix it. How does that feel? Terrifying. But also... She paused, searching for words. Also clarifying. I've spent so many years resenting how much we needed you that I never stopped to appreciate why you were willing to help. I felt something loosen in my chest, the first hint of hope I'd allowed myself regarding Julia. I realized something else, too. I've been angry at you for my entire adult life, but I never understood why until recently. What did you realize? I was angry because you made it look so easy. Working multiple jobs, managing Dad's properties, taking care of all of us, always having time to listen to our problems, and money to solve our crises. You made strength look effortless, and I thought that meant you didn't struggle or sacrifice or need support yourself. She turned to face me directly. I thought your strength meant you didn't need the same care and consideration I needed. I treated your competence like it was unlimited, instead of recognizing it as a gift you were choosing to share with us. Julia. I'm not done. Her voice was stronger now. I also realized that somewhere along the way, I stopped seeing you as a person and started seeing you as a resource. When you moved to the nursing home, I was relieved because it meant someone else was responsible for your day-to-day needs. When Eric suggested the trust arrangement, I went along with it because I thought it would guarantee our security without requiring me to actually think about what you wanted or needed. The honesty in her words was more than I dared hope for. When you fought back, when you reclaimed control of your assets and started this project, my first reaction was rage. Not because you were making bad decisions, but because you were making decisions at all, without consulting us, without prioritizing our needs. She laughed bitterly. Do you know how horrible that sounds? It sounds human, Julia. Flawed, but human. I want to do better, Mom. I want to find a way to have a relationship with you that isn't based on what you can do for me financially, but I honestly don't know how. I've been depending on you for so long that I'm not sure who I am without that safety net. I reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. You're someone who raised 2 children while supporting your husband's business dreams. You're someone who managed a household budget and community commitments and still found time to volunteer at the school library. You're someone who's intelligent and capable and much stronger than you give yourself credit for. But I don't want to feel strong. I feel lost. Being lost isn't the same as being weak, sweetheart. Sometimes being lost is the first step toward finding out who you really are. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Mrs. Chen lead a small group through gentle stretching exercises on the garden's lawn. Can I ask you something? Julia said. Of course. If Frank and I end up losing the house, if we need to find somewhere affordable to live while we rebuild our finances, would you consider renting to us? Here, I mean. As tenants, paying market rate, following the same rules as everyone else. The question surprised me. I'd imagined many scenarios for how my relationship with my children might evolve, but I hadn't considered the possibility of them becoming part of the community I was building. The waiting list is quite long, I said carefully. And priority goes to seniors who can't afford market-rate housing elsewhere. I understand, I thought I should ask. Sarah's going away to college next year anyway, and David's already independent. It might be good for Frank and me to live simply for a while, to remember what actually matters. I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation. What I saw instead was exhaustion and genuine uncertainty, the expression of someone who'd finally admitted they didn't have all the answers. Julia, if you're serious about this, about changing how we relate to each other, it can't just be about living arrangements. It has to be about rebuilding trust, slowly and honestly. I know. It would mean acknowledging the harm that was done and working to repair it. It would mean accepting that I have the right to make decisions about my own life, even decisions you disagree with. I'm trying to learn that, and it would mean finding ways to contribute to this community that aren't about what you can get from it, but about what you can give to it. She nodded. I've been thinking about that too. Before the kids were born, I taught elementary school. Maybe I could organize educational programs for the residents. Literacy classes, computer skills, that sort of thing. For the first time, in months, I saw a glimpse of the daughter I'd raised. The one who'd chosen teaching because she wanted to help people learn and grow. That's a wonderful idea. So you'd consider it. Our application, I mean, when we're ready to submit it? I smiled at her careful phrasing. I'd consider it, like I would any application, based on need, community fit, and ability to contribute, positively to what we're building here. Fair enough. She squeezed my hand. Mom, I want you to know that even if this doesn't work out, even if we can't find our way back to each other, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. This place, standing up for yourself, refusing to be invisible. It's inspiring. Thank you, sweetheart. And I want you to know that David was right when he told Eric and me that we were asking him to choose between love and truth. That's not fair, and it's not loving. We were scared of losing control, but we ended up losing something much more important. What's that? The respect of our children, the trust of the one person who'd always believed in us, the opportunity to be better than our worst impulses. She stood up, smoothing her skirt with hands that shook slightly. I should go. But, Mom, thank you for not giving up on the possibility that we could change, even when we gave you every reason to. As I watched her walk away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in relation to my children in a very long time. Hope, not the desperate hope of someone trying to hold a breaking family together through force of will, but the patient hope of someone who'd finally learned the difference between loving people and enabling them. Ruth appeared beside me, settling onto the bench with a satisfied sigh. How did that go? Better than I expected. She's starting to understand the difference between needing support and demanding rescue. And you? How are you holding up? I thought about the question seriously. 6 months ago, I'd been a forgotten woman in a nursing home, my children managing my life from a distance while using my resources to prop up their own. Today, I was the founder of a housing initiative that would serve hundreds of seniors over the coming years, a woman who'd reclaimed her agency and discovered new purpose. But more than that, I was finally free to love my children without sacrificing myself, free to offer support without enabling dependence, free to be generous without being taken for granted. I'm happy, Ruth. For the first time in decades, I'm genuinely happy. She patted my hand with the satisfied expression of someone who'd been waiting years for me to figure that out. It's about time, Evelyn Parker. It's about damn time. As the sun set over our little community garden, I realized that everything I'd lost, my children's automatic respect, my role as family rescuer, my illusion of being indispensable, had been replaced by something far more valuable, the knowledge that I was worth fighting for, even when the person doing the fighting had to be me. And that knowledge, I understood now, was something no one could ever take away from me again. The end.